Hello to this second video in which I'm going to talk to you about the workspaces and the sets of tools that you have for each of the workspaces. They change as you change your workspace, and they also change when you go between object mode and edit mode, and that might get a little confusing every once in a while, but let's see how it goes. Your basic setup when you open up Blender looks like this. So I'll just lose the lamp because we don't need it, and the camera because we don't need that either. And now we are in the layout workspace. The layout workspace has these tools available for you. One is the select box, which means that you can just drag around and select stuff in your area. If you had two more objects in here, I just put in a icosphere and let's say another UV sphere. When you drag like this, you can select all of them, or you can select two of them. So this would be your box selection method. You also have a select circle and a select lasso, which are slightly different, but they work very intuitively. The next one here is called the cursor button. So with this, you can drop your cursor wherever you like, and whatever happens next will happen at that point. Add a mesh, add a cube, and it will appear where you had your cursor. You can also snap the cursor to different places by pressing Shift S, and you can, for example, get the cursor to the world origin, or you can get it to the previous active object, or you can snap to the grid, or you can move your selected object to whatever object is active at the moment. So I'll just snap it to the world origin, which is cursor to world origin, which is right there at this intersection of the X and the Y axis. This is the move tool for the active element, whatever you may happen to have. Pressing these arrows will move it along that axis, and I strongly recommend pressing it on the axis and not on the circle, because the circle lets you do this. You can move it in all three axes at the same time, and there's absolutely no way of telling where that object will fall. So it's much easier to use the arrows for this. The next thing is the rotation, which will do the same thing. It will give you a tool to rotate along an axis. You can also press the control key and get it to rotate in a different way, and you can press shift to make it rotate slower. So control will snap it to different degrees. The next one is scale. Again, if you scale along the axis, it works like this, or you can grab the center and scale the entire object. You can also just press the S key and then move your mouse, and the same thing will happen. This will give you all three at one. I have never used this because I find this very confusing, but if you want to be experimental, by all means use that. Then we have an annotation, which is a way of drawing something on your screen. I have never found any use for this, but it appears as a plane in the direction of whatever view you happen to have. And getting rid of these annotations means that you have to go into the View menu, View tab on this N toolbar, find annotations, and then delete this note to get it to go. The next tool we have here is the distance measuring tool, which actually appears in the same place, ruler data. And with this you can measure the distances between objects. It's actually more useful in the edit mode. For example, if you had this and you wanted to know what is the distance between this vertex and that vertex, you can just press down on your control and it will snap to the nearest vertex, and you can see what the distances are. And all of this ruler data is down here, and you can delete it the same way, basically. And if not, then you can click in here and delete the click and delete. It's not very easy to actually touch those, but that's how it goes. And this is a funny thing. This is interactive adding of basic shapes. If you wanted to add a cone or a cube or a cylinder, you can pick the cylinder and then click somewhere, and it will draw you the bottom of the cylinder, and when you let go of the mouse and push up, it will let you design the height, and then when you click on the left mouse again, you will be left with the cube, with whatever it was that you were making. Now, I have to say that I haven't used this that much either. I much prefer using the Shift A after placing the 3D cursor. That lets me place the object wherever I want, but in a very specific manner. So that was the object mode. Let's go into edit mode. I will get me a new file just to lose this mess. And now when I tab into edit mode, you can see that I have three options here. One is the vertex select mode. Whenever I click on something, it picks the vertex I'm on. And if I take the edge select mode, it will select any edge that I click on. And if I want two edges, I can click on these with the Shift key down. And I have a face selection mode right here as the last one. Pick any face, or with the Shift key down, pick any number of faces. These parts are the same. Select box, select cursor, move, rotate and scale and transform. So if I pick this one and rotate, it will rotate the three faces that I have selected, which is basically the same as having the whole cube selected. But if I have just one face selected, I can rotate that cube, that face, and it will give me that kind of a rotated face on this mesh. That looks like a mesh, by the way. I can scale it this way, that way, and of course I cannot scale, on the normal of the face. And this is the same, it has everything in it. Then you have the annotate and the measure, which measure is much better than the other one. Turn on vector mode, turn on this and press Control, snap to any vertex, and you can see what is the distance between these two vertices. You can also grab your measurement tool, and if you want to, you can make it show you the angle inside that tool. I'll go to my view and annotations, ruler data, and delete that. There's also this same method for creating interactive cubes and whatever basic meshes you want to create. The thing is that they become part of the same mesh. Inside this cube you have two cubes actually, so no matter how many you create, they will always, this is all part of one mesh. So if I just go in here and I select any of the cubes and I say X and delete, the whole thing will disappear. So be careful with that. We have extrude, which is one of the most used tools in here. I can pick any face, for example, and extrude up. Pick that face, extrude this way, pick that face, and I can also grab the plus sign here and extrude. So this creates more geometry. You have more vertices now, you have more parts that you can touch. This is very useful. The other one is inset faces. If I take this face here, and with the inset face I pull in, I move my mouse like this, I start from a bit further away, it gives me more faces. So now I can, if I want to extrude this, I can go into extrude region and extrude just that part, or extrude just that part. you will find that this is one of the most useful tools there is. Bevel means taking your edges and making them rounder. So you have to be in edge mode. You go in here and you'll just select a few edges like so. And now when you, you can come in from the edge with the mouse. I'll move it up a little. And if I now go in here with the bevel tool, I can add more segments to it. I can also, I can also use this segments thing in here, which will give me better control on the segments that I'm using. It's also possible not to use the bevel tool, but to press select the edges that you want to act on. Press Ctrl B and drag down and use the mouse wheel to define how many segments you want to have. So this makes it easier for you to get a nice rounded edge. This one here is a loop cut, but for the loop cuts there is also a quick tool which is Ctrl R, and when you point the mouse at the edge here you can use the mouse wheel to get as many loop cuts as you like, and when you click twice it will lock the loop rings in place. So if I want to have 3 loop rings here between this and this edge loop, I will just go in here and use my mouse key twice, press the left mouse twice, and they are now in place. If I want to scale something, I can add the loop rings, 2 of them, click once, and then just move the mouse, press S and move the mouse, and I can scale the part I want to do. I can also scale with Shift Z to scale in the other 2 directions. Not Z, but X and Y, or with Y I can scale in just the Y direction. So you will see that the edge rings are very, very useful. So you can add them here with the loop cut. The knife is used for cutting between edges. So if you get the knife and you go in here, pull down with your mouse and double click here, you will see that you can create new topology like so, and press enter to see your new geometry. Sometimes useful, but it's not my favorite tool. Here you have a poly build. I have no clue what that is, but you have a spin. With the spin you can pick any face, for example, and you can spin it using this tool here. Again, this is something that is better handled using modifiers, so I haven't used it that much. Smooth will flatten the angles of selected vertices. If I select everything and I press on smooth, I can make massive edits to the shape. Not much used. Edge slide is actually rather good because then you can take an edge and slide it along the other edges. Sometimes this is useful. Shrink or fatten along vertices, along normals. Shear means to move it against the normal. These tools are something that I haven't found any use for, so I don't know how they are used really. Rip region will give you the possibility of selecting something like this and then ripping the region. Okay, you can also select the area and hit P and separate by selection, which means that you now have a different you can separate two parts if you want to make a hole and a cover for it. The easiest way is to select the area you want to take and then press P and select by region, and it will give you this. Now, I've done everything that I've shown you here in the layout workspace, but the same stuff can be done here in modeling workspace, which is essentially the same, but you see it's like easier to see what you have in edit mode in the modeling workspace. The sculpting workspace is where you have an object like this and you want to sculpt on it. First you need to have a lot of vertices in it. I went in and I made a bunch of new vertices so that there is something for the sculpting tool to work on. And then when you go into the sculpting, you can use these tools here to turn your mesh into something different. I haven't used much of this. I haven't found the need for this, but I've been told that the sculpting is actually very interesting. And if you want to, you can go into YouTube and search how to make a human skull out of a cube, and it's all done in this sculpting tool, and it's interesting in that sense. But for me, sculpting has never been of any interest. I will now take another blank window. Save. UV editing is where you have your object and you select everything, and then you say unwrap, and you get a flat representation of your object in here. This is necessary in many times when you want to have materials that have textures. You want to have a way of applying your textures in a proper way into your your mesh. So that's what is done here in the UV editing. This is the UV representation of your cube. If you select this, if you go in here and you pick this face, it's here, that face is here, so you can see which face is where. You can also go into shading and add a texture, an image texture here, make it a color grid, plug that into the base color, and now when you go into the UV editing, you can see where your faces are in the map of the UV. And if you were to go to shading, you can see that this is how your cube looks like. Texture paint is basically for painting directly onto your cube. If you want to do that, you can come in here, and whatever you draw here will happen here. I'll make it a little clearer. You can see your cube in here. F5, E5, they are here. So if I go in here and I start coloring, it will actually color here. And I can also do the same thing here. I can paint on my mesh, like here, and it will happen here on the texture. So that's all you have to do. Shading is where the actual magic happens regarding your meshes a look and feel. You can have a texture map in here, or you can just lose this, add another texture, make it a checker texture. One of the colors can be bright red and the other color can be bright white, and you can take the color into the base color and you have a cube that is colored like that. There are many things that you can do to your material nodes. If you add another node, you can add all of these types of nodes in here. In the vector, I think you have mapping, yes. So you can add your scale, or you can rotate your scale. Should be able to do this. I don't know why it's not doable. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. This was my error. I'm doing it as a vector, and that won't go. So I'll just lose this from the between. There will be an entire presentation on how to do the shading. So this is just to show what happens in any of these places. The animation tab works so that you have your object in a certain place where you want to keep it. So you add a keyframe for it there. Insert it for location, rotation and scale. Then you go to, let's say, frame 80. Move your object there. Add location, rotation, scale keyframe. Go to a 120. Move it over there. And insert keyframe. And then snap it to the center again. Selection to cursor in the frame numbers 160. So I will snap it to snap selection to cursor and insert keyframes. And then you can make the end frame 160. And now when you run your animation, your object will magically move from those places and return in the center of your area. Rendering is used for making renders. Your render results will appear here in this list. So if you have multiple render results, they will appear here in the list and you can just check them out. To render something, first of all you need a camera, which is here, and with a numbered 0, you can see what is seen by the camera now at the moment. And if you add a lamp, point lamp, and move it somewhere here, and turn on your workspace shading, viewport shading, and now if you were to press F12, your machine will give you a render of this object, and you will see that happens here in the render result list. So that is, you always wind up in the rendering workspace when you do any type of rendering. So if I were to move this lamp in here, put it there, and then do another quick render, you'll see the difference between them. And it should show here in, actually it's shown in here in the slots. Yeah. So that is the render. Compositing is, I won't be able to show you this in detail because compositing is again having objects in here and then using their nodes, the node system that you have. You have the output node in here, you have your render layers node in here, and you will probably would want to have different nodes in here, and they would all come up into the composite output, and then when you do the render, it will appear here in the composite slot. and then when you do the render, it will of course appear in the render window. So compositing is something that I have never done in any detail, and I will not be expecting you to do that on this course, because this is a basic course. But I know that if you want to get really spectacular results out of your renders, then you need to learn how to use the compositor, but I've never done that. Geometry nodes is yet another system that uses the nodes, and the idea is that I have a cube in here. It has an input node, it's called the geometry, and it has an output node, which is the group output node. And if you were to add a node in here, such as if you add a geometry transform node, you can place it in here, and now you can move, scale, and rotate your object in this system, in the geometry node system. So in a way it is exactly the same as you would have in your shading or your texture nodes, material nodes, and then again in your compositing nodes, where you have an input and you have something that happens in between, and you have an output node. But I haven't done any big research yet into how to use this geometry. I do know that it's rather effective, in the sense that when you add a curve, you may add a mesh primitive, for example, like a cone, and make that into the geometry. It appears here. You can see all the data that is related to all the vertices. You can see them in here, but we don't want to see that, so I'll make it slightly bigger. And if I go into the wire mode, you can see more. So I can have more vertices or less vertices, side segments, fill segments in the bottom, radius on the top, so you can make it into a cylinder if you want to. Radius bottom, and then depth. So you can basically you can get everything from here. And if you add another basic mesh primitive like a cube, and you place it in here, and you pull it into the geometry output, and you have your cube in here, you need a geometry join geometry node in here, which enables you to show two nodes at the same time. And if you want them to be in a different place, then you can add a geometry transform node for this one and move it away from the other one. Oh, sorry, not a transform. Yeah. So with the transform, you can move it or scale it from the node system here. So basically what I'm saying is that these are actually modifiers. Everything that you can see here can be done with the modifiers, but having this system here enables you to act on multiple objects at one time. For example, you can have two nodes, two like a cone and a cube, and you can add a scale node in between them, and when you pull the scale, it will scale both of them at the same time. So it's just slightly easier for you to manage multiple meshes. That's basically everything there. I showed you the scripting one last time, so if you are here and you paste any Python down here on the right hand side, on the left hand side, you will then see what happens with pasting this piece of code and then running it will give you 40 cubes in random locations. You can also see it here if you change the editor type to 3D viewport. So yes, that is what you have in the workspaces. Here on the top right you have your object viewer. You have all of the stuff that is related to those parts in your screen. And then you have your properties window here, which will also change as you pick on any of these tabs. But we will go through these tabs in later movies or later videos, so don't worry about those right now. So I hope you enjoyed this rather bumbling video, and if you have any questions, use the Moodle. Drop me a note in the discussions and I will answer your questions there so everybody gets to see what's happening. Thanks for watching.